Hi everyone, a very warm welcome to today's virtual session on enhancing L&D with generative AI, pioneering the future of work. I'm Aastha from People Matters and I'll be your host for today. The era of AI is here, and while it is dramatically changing every aspect of work, the disruption it is causing in the learning and development function is nothing short of revolutionary. Research from the World Economic Forum projects that 61% workers will require retraining by 2027. Today, the L&D functions of future-focused organizations are working towards upskilling and reskilling their employees in a way that arms them with the skill set to harness the power of AI. By leveraging artificial intelligence, well-crafted L&D programs can unlock new avenues for creativity, efficiency, effectiveness, taking the employee learning experience to unprecedented heights. To discuss all this and more, I would like to welcome our panelists today. Today we have with us Hemalakshmi Raju, who is the Chief Learning Officer, Diversity and Inclusion, Reliance Industries Limited. Hema is an HR leader driven by a strong passion to do transformative work with individuals as well as organizations. She holds multi-sector experience and is currently heading the learning and development and diversity and inclusion functions for Reliance. She's also a member of Harvard Business Publishing's Asia Pacific Leadership Advisory Board Corporate Learning. Welcome, Hema. Pleasure to have you on our panel.
Thanks, Aastha. Happy to be here.
Next, we have with us Mukhwinder Singh Bains, who leads learning for Accenture in India. Mukhwinder is an experienced learning lead with a demonstrated history of working in the information technology and the services industry. He is deeply committed to community and social services and focuses on leveraging his skills to make a positive and lasting impact. Welcome, Mukhwinder. Pleasure to have you on board.
Thank you so much. Looking forward to the conversation.
We also have with us Akanksha Kapoor, who's the head of customer success Asia Pacific Coursera for Business. Akanksha has worked across regions like North America, Southeast Asia, and the Middle East. She's passionate about creating impact at a large scale and has been a core member of the Startup India and Make in India initiatives. She's currently head of customer success for Asia Pacific at Coursera for Business. Thank you for joining us today and welcome to the session.
Thank you for inviting me, Aastha. Pleasure to be here.
A quick note for our audience before we get started. If you have any questions, please feel free to use the chat window. We'll bring up the questions towards the end of the discussion during the 10 minutes that we have reserved for the Q&A. Welcome to our entire panel. Very excited to have this discussion. Let's get right into it. My first question is, the AI-led disruption is undeniably one of the most significant and modern breakthroughs. Generative artificial intelligence is already reshaping industries at an unprecedented pace. Do you think it will be a game changer in the realm of L&D as well? Mukhwinder, would you want to begin for us?
Sure, absolutely. And thank you so much again for having me here. I think this is one of the most discussed conversations within our own firm and within the larger learning community of what would Gen AI and AI actually have an impact. And I think there are lots of point of views within ourselves of trying to see where exactly it lands in. Just to answer your question first, I think it will be a game changer. Now, how do firms, how do organizations leverage that, and how do they embrace this is going to be dependent on how easily one is able to bring some of these things to life. I think areas around the tech skills, some of these things are being talked far more regularly, and of course the impact that is being seen is far more around the leadership and around the professional development and around some of these other areas. I think the conversations are on saying, what is it that we can bring in? And what is it that would actually have a positive impact? Just some of the conversation that we've been having is there an opportunity for us as we are helping individuals upskill themselves or cross-skill themselves? What are some skills that would come far more easily, and what are things that they may have more challenges kind of bringing around? In my mind, I think this is still an open question. We are working through some of these areas, learning paths intuitively coming for individuals, much more focused to an individual needs rather than generic ones. I think that's where we are at this point of time.
Very interesting where you point out about focusing on an individual's learning needs, and I think firms today are really working towards creating a learning ecosystem that propels all of us forward. Hema, would you want to go next?
Sure, Aastha, and resonate a lot with what Mukwinder said. Early days, but all the signs seem to indicate that yes, it's going to disrupt a lot. And I would say the disruption has already happened because if I look at the extent to which an AI, a generative AI tool like ChatGPT has been adopted, that's unbelievable. So learning has already started on that because learning is not just what is driven by the learning professionals, but there's a lot of self-learning happening there. But even if I look at the context of organization-driven learning, there are two key shifts that I'm foreseeing. A lot of it we have been talking about a lot even in the past. One, we tend to hold the perspective that technology can be leveraged for driving certain kinds of learning, especially if it is focused on awareness creation and knowledge building. Skill building, yes, in a selective manner using simulations and stuff like that. I think that shift is very much going to happen now. Because if you look at the potential of Gen AI, the potential that it holds even to build skills, assess skills is huge. So it's not just about technology being driven for knowledge building, but skill building is going to be big. And also that important piece around self-learning. If you look at organization, almost every other organization talks about building a culture of learning. How do we get individuals to learn on their own? Now there is an interest to learn, but oftentimes what happens is that when we look at many of the past or to some extent in the current self-learning tools, they are not personalized to that extent. So some way that they're not able to hold the attention of the individuals, which again is going to change. So self-learning is going to happen in a big way. And if I have to go by what is being spoken about, then I see the potential of Gen AI overall to impact the learning across the learning value chain. If I have to look at it from an ADDIE perspective, be it when it comes to learning need analysis. Traditionally, we have been looking at only learning data for identifying learning needs. We look at the information that comes during, let's say, your talent processes, during the performance cycles to look at what is the kind of learning that people need. But there's a huge amount of business data that is lying, which can indicate a lot of learning needs. What are customers buying? What are customers saying? What are the repeated challenges that we are facing in an industry like ours, manufacturing, in the shop floor, other repeated issues that are coming up? All of these are potential issues that can highlight what are the kind of learning that the organization needs, or particular segments within the organization need. Today, we rely on human intuition a lot. We talk to leaders, we talk to managers saying, what are the business challenges that you have? What are the kind of problems that you face? Whereas I see the possibility of technology being able to aggregate, there's a lot of big data, but inside sort of it, technology will be able to aggregate and give it to us. If I take it ahead further, content curation, which was a shift less than a decade ago, we said it's no more about content creation, it's content curation. Now you don't have to do it manually anymore. There's technology doing that for you very fast in a very beautiful manner. All the way up till evaluation. Be it, I see that in Coursera already, you go through a course, you put in your inputs, there's an assessment that happens, advanced levels of it. Similarly, the quizzes that are run. So across the learning value chain, starting from attending need identification all the way up till impact assessment, I see a huge potential that it holds. But again, like what Mukwinder was saying, it's about, is it becoming accessible? How do we actually bring it to life is a key question that is lying in front of us.
Thank you so much, Hema, for your insights. Akanksha,
Yeah,
what do
I
you?
mean, this is really well put, Mukwinder and Hima. I think I completely agree with what you've shared, and maybe just to also kind of bring in a slightly different perspective is, a couple of years back we were all talking about automation and how that impacted low skill jobs, right? And with the introduction of ChatGPT and generative AI, we're no longer seeing just low skill jobs being impacted, but even high skill jobs being impacted in that sense. And so when we're talking about generative AI being a disruptor, I feel that it's no longer limited to only coders and developers. It's actually relevant to every role, like Hema was talking about earlier. This includes financial analysts, legal teams, HR teams, right? And I think as organizations working with L&D leaders, really understanding how these are defined for each of the different functions, can really help in bringing and augmenting the increase of productivity for white collared workers. And the reason I say this is, and our CEO says this all the time, is that any good CFO or any good CEO should be talking to their CLO right now. And the reason for that is, there's been a recent study that McKinsey's done as well, which is, CLOs really have the opportunity to help organizations capitalize on a $4.4 trillion productivity gains from AI. And I think, it's a really nice study which really talks about which roles, what kind of annual spend do they have. I'm happy to share it offline as well. But I think there's a real opportunity to bring in those productivity gains. So there is always this double-edged sword about thinking about, are we going to lose jobs with AI? But there are also so many new jobs that are going to get created by AI as well. And it's more about what kind of productivity gains can you get from existing jobs. That will really be the game changer, I feel, from this. But yeah, adding a second point to that, to what Mukhwinder was mentioning earlier, is how do we make the access more available? So I see this as not just a disruptor, but also an enabler. There is so many new things that we can do with AI, that it allows us to unlock a lot of opportunities for learners, for organizations, for just individuals at large in different functions, and how can we make that more personalized, more interactive, and more available for them as well. So I think there's a huge opportunity there. But yeah.
Thanks, Akansha. I love the portion about AI being a disruptor as well as an enabler, because I think that is the crossroads we are also at. For my next question, I'd like to ask you, as technology continues to evolve at a breakneck speed, which latest breakthroughs in AI can be leveraged to create L&D programs and learning experiences that are interactive, engaging, and customized as per employee needs? Hema, would you want to begin with this?
Sure, Asta. So I will not talk so much about technologies, but let me talk about what are the use cases where can it be leveraged. Let me start with chatbots, which is going to have a huge amount of utility. We use them even today, but the way it can adapt itself, lend itself in days to come seems mind-boggling. Okay, for instance, we talk a lot about just-in-time learning, just what I need at the point of need. Am I getting that nugget which is going to help me in doing my job? I think that's where it is going to be a game changer. So be it sales jobs, be it manufacturing line jobs, be it service jobs, everywhere this is a huge need. So point of need learning is something that chatbots are going to drive in a very big manner. And interestingly, I was in conversation with one of my peers in the consulting industry. And what this person was talking about is very interesting. A lot of psychometric assessments. So they are looking at leveraging chatbots for giving feedback post-assessment. Now that's wonderful. Rather than me getting a 10-page report, which I have to help myself going through it, if there is a chatbot which is going to explain. And this person was also talking about how it is interactive, so that even if the individual has a question, needs a clarification, the chatbot will be able to do that. So that's something which was very, very interesting for me. Also, in an organization like ours, we have a presence across the country and beyond, and we are a multilingual, we cater to a multilingual population. And the potential of a tool like NLP towards translation or making transcripts available. One of the challenges that we face in a manufacturing organization is that reaching out to the last person in the shop floor, wherein language matters a lot. Okay. And I also know that Coursera is already doing something in this space. So if there is, otherwise, we used to spend huge amount of time and effort developing e-learning courses. That's another big area wherein I see the potential of Gen AI coming in. Emotional recognition, be it as the individual is going through a program, suddenly interest levels are dropping. I'm hearing about, I know this is still imagination, how will it come to life is something that we will have to see. If you see the interest levels dropping, the person is just turning pages, what can I do? How do I engage the person? But I also know of instances where what I'm going to talk about now is used, wherein you use emotional recognition for skill building. You get to do a role play. For instance, you're dealing, let's say, a scenario like dealing with a tough customer. Your AI is interacting with you, behaving like the customer. And if you see, your your emotions are wavering, your anger levels are going up, you're getting irritated, the machine is able to pick it up and immediately, gives you feedback on that. I know these experiments have been done, but it's time now we look at scaling it up. Facial recognition, biometric authentication. In fact, this is something that we have started doing in an organization, especially when you talk about assessments. Okay, one of the challenges has been that it has to be face to face. Otherwise, what if there's impersonation happening? Somebody else is doing it for you. Whereas we have started, we're looking at utilizing facial recognition systems so that we know that it is the individual who is doing it, not just facial recognition. The AI can also detect if there is some unacceptable activity happening. For instance, I'm taking the assessment and somebody is standing behind me. It immediately, marks it as as not normal thing. So those are some scenarios that I'm looking at. Recommendation systems. We in over the past few years we have been having recommendations engines on our learning management systems, and the quality has been getting better. Okay, initially it was not so good. It was more of mass recommendation that it used to do. Whereas we're also talking about adaptive recommendations. It's not just about recommending one thing, but as I'm going through it, if it finds that my interest levels are changing, if it finds that I'm looking at additional things, then how can you do it? And in fact, many of you must have seen it 2, 3 days back. I was reading this news item wherein they're talking about recommendation engines, AI, Gen AI recommendations engines, wherein they can dip into your mailbox, dip into your, those things and also recommend based on it. At one level, it feels a little scary, but that's where we are moving. So those are some use cases that I wanted to highlight.
Thank you so much, Hema. Very interesting insights from you there. And it is a scary and exciting time, I'd have to say. Akanksha, would you want to go next?
Yeah, sure. And I think these are really interesting use cases, Emma, that you've brought. I'm very interested in hearing more about the emotional recognition piece. I don't think we're doing enough of that today, but would love to hear your thoughts on that a little bit more, maybe at a later time as well. But to answer your question, Asta, I think I see it in two parts, right? And we were talking a little bit about disruption and enablers, right? And I think the disruption is happening in two parts, as how I see it, right? One is existing jobs, right, that need to be done differently. How are you doing your current jobs more differently, being more productive? And then there are other where you need the upskilling. And I would say there are workers that are transitioning, that have been impacted, and we need to help them get into new jobs, which is where the reskilling needs to come into place. And I think in terms of the enablement, we were talking about making it more personalized, more accessible. How do we really leverage that? I can talk a little bit about how Coursera is doing this, and Hema spoke a little bit about what we're doing, but I'd love to elaborate a little bit on some of the ways in which we are actually using AI to personalize learning, make it more interactive, and build access to a lot of learners. And I think we have a lot of viewers today that are joining from the Asia Pacific region. So one thing that I'd love to highlight is AI has really enabled us to create training content which is high quality at a much lower cost, and kind of reduce those language barriers, right? So I would say we've used generative AI and machine learning models to bring down our cost of translation of courses to almost 1/10. So I would say Coursera is now offering very high quality content that is coming from top industry and university partners, the likes of Google, IBM, Duke, Stanford, so on and so forth. And we've taken our top 2,000 courses within business, tech, and data catalogs, and we've translated them into 9 languages. These include, some of these are Bahasa, Thai, German, Arabic, French, and Spanish. And talking about reaching the last mile worker as well, the person who's on the shop floor. We're also working towards now getting Hindi very quickly onto that as well. So I think with Gen AI, it's one, reduced the cost quite a bit. It's increased our ability to deliver these translations, not just in terms of transcripts and subtitles, but also in the overall experience that you would have on the platform. And we just recently actually launched a video where we had our CEO do a deep fake video, which allowed him to actually speak in 9 different languages. So very soon, hopefully you'll see also the audio of a lot of our instructors being in the different languages. So the experience is very, very personalized in that sense. And it, of course, opens up a lot of language barriers that we faced so far. And I would say the second part, while this is more from a perspective of opening up language barriers, I think there's so much to say when it comes to personalization or the interactivity and engagement part of things, right? The chatbot that Hema was speaking about earlier, what we've done at Coursera is we've introduced a chatbot within our learning ecosystem, which is called the Coursera Coach. Right, we often hear a lot of customers, I hear them tell me, learners sometimes get stuck, they don't know where to turn to advice for how to really apply some of this content to their existing roles. And what we've done is, we've taken chat gpt, we've taken the realm of Coursera itself and said, use this as a mentor, as a coach, feed it information, ask it questions, whether it's to summarize learning, whether it's to tell me what should I be learning next. How do I'm a worker, or I'm in customer success in a edtech company. How do I apply the second leadership point to what I'm doing, and with my team? Can you give me examples of that? And the Coursera coach will actually work with you through that, right? So I think it's interesting when you're able to really contextualize the learning that you're doing into your job role. I think that's really, really powerful when we talk about personalized learning. And I think what's also been interesting to see is that a lot of L&D teams work on developing their own content, right? So while Coursera has its own set of content, I'm sure Reliance and Accenture and other companies have their own subject matter experts, where they produce content which is only for their specific companies. And what we've done is, what used to earlier take about weeks or months to do, we've now built an AI assisted private authoring feature, right? And that, what's super powerful about that is, you have your own content, you upload it onto the system, it creates an automated transcript, gives you automated assessments, which I think was one of the biggest challenges in terms of and cost drivers, I would say, in terms of doing that. It also mixes and matches courses that are coming from Coursera and allows you to kind of define, I just want this to be a half an hour training for my employees, or I want this to be a 2 hour training, and that happens in a matter of minutes, right? And I think just the speed at which you're able to deliver this kind of personalized learning at scale becomes extremely powerful, in my opinion, when we talk about what are the enablers of AI. So those are just a couple of examples that I can share, and we do have some customers that are using it, finding it super interesting. It's very interesting to see what kind of prompts people are actually putting into these chatbots. So yeah, I guess a lot more to learn from what we're seeing so far.
Absolutely. I also love the portion where you talked about contextualizing learning for your job roles as well. Mukhwinder, would you want to go in?
I think more or less everything has been said. I mean, it'll just be a repetition only. But I think areas like chatbot and all are something that those are important ones to help learners kind of be guided towards the right set of areas. And any technology that can help make that happen would be would really kind of reduce extended time being spent looking for what is required and where do I find it. I think some of those are going to be important areas. I think the overall screen fatigue that individuals have started to build over the years, especially in last 2 3 years, anything that can help reduce that, anything that can help get answers faster. I remember hosting Elliot Macy, a few years ago, to one of our Bangalore office, and very interesting thing that he said was that, and this was before the whole Gen AI and the whole AI piece was there. I'm talking about probably about 4 years ago or so. And he said, and as I was talking and saying, what are the skills and what we as learning professionals, he said, one of the skills that sooner than later we will have to do and help both our learning and learning professionals and learners to learn is their ability to find right information. Yeah, their ability to Google and find the right information that is relevant and not something which is much more. I mean, and for example, all of us, right? And whether technically savvy or not, in case if our phones or our watches or any of these things don't sync up or don't work or something happens, the place that we go first to is to go to YouTube and find how to solve it. Yeah. A few days ago, my car battery conked off, and I wanted to, go back and find out what battery, because I want to call up the battery guy and tell him, and I couldn't find the battery because it was hidden underneath. And what I did was I went to YouTube, put my car details in the sense of the model, and said, "Where is the car battery?" And YouTube gave me a couple of options. I looked through it and I found out. I think the important one, therefore, the important one, and what he said probably 4 years ago is, how do we find right information and not all the information? And therefore, and I think somebody asked that question a little while ago, some of the skills for us as learning professionals would be helping our people find right information, making it easy. I think again, and what I heard a few years ago was the whole prompt engineering part of it. I had, when the first time I heard, I was completely clueless. I said, there's some new engineering, civil head, and you have your computer science and you have all of this. What is prompt engineering? And it took me a while to figure that one out. And it is so right. I mean, today what you need is skills like prompt engineering, irrespective of what skills you are. My son, who just started to go to college, he has some interview for one of the groups or societies that he has, and he wanted to know some answers. He went to chat, GPTs, type the question, how do I say this, and it gives. So I said, what you need to learn is prompt engineering to find the right kind of question, so it gives you right kind of answers. I think those are skills that we would need sooner than later for our people to understand, learn, which will eventually make some of our lives much more easier than getting into more complexities.
Thank you so much, Mukhwinder, for that. Prompt engineering is blown up, so as to speak, over the last year and a half, I feel. But I will start with you for the next question as well. How can organizations work towards charting an efficient and impactful reskilling policy, leveraging generative AI that not only elevates the workforce's skill level, but also contributes towards organizational success?
I think some of the things we've spoken about around this, in some of the earlier conversation. I think the most important piece, and as I mentioned earlier, would be for us to figure out where we are vis-a-vis that particular skill, and therefore what is that skill gap. And newer technologies like Gen AI and others will help the individuals figure out where they are at this point of time, and that could be through the initial assessments, and through could be the way one kind of frames questions, and what excuse me, the kind of projects one has done, and therefore all that data. And I know Hemalakshmi was talking about the tons of data that one has internally available, which is whether it is based on how the individuals have been performing on projects, how the individuals have been doing, the overall learning that they've been doing. If we can help, and if technology can help bring some of that data together and help us baseline where the individuals are, and I'm sure Reliance is same, but and a lot of other organizations, we have over 300,000 people. For us to go back and customize learning to the level that individual, it is much more individual focused, it is much more customized to that individual, will help us. And I think technologies like these will help us find what the gaps are, and therefore tools like Gen AI will help us find what that learning path should be. What are the areas that individual needs to focus on based on where you want, and those can be some of those learnings can be based on my personal aspiration of what I want to do, or that can be based on the projects that we are expected to be staffed in 2 months, 3 months, 6 months down the line, and therefore what are that particular gap and what I need to learn. I think those would be key, ensuring that all the right data, all the right information is kind of brought together, helps you decide what is your learning path, and tells you what we can go. And I know there are partners that we work with, and Coursera is one of them, but Workera, you do an assessment on a Workera, it helps you find out where you are, what your gaps are, and then it helps you find out what are the relevant courses on Coursera that you can go to and go back and do that. I think those are areas that will continue to evolve as we move forward. And those are the things that will help individuals, employees, move faster and and help obviously businesses get people ready faster. And which are the ones who are ready, not just people who are trying, but it also helps you give a graded learning path accordingly.
Thank you, Mukhvinder. Hema, would you want to go next?
Sure, Asta. So I will expand it to include upskilling as well. These are related terms that we keep talking about a lot. Now, two important requirements when it comes to reskilling or upskilling. One is speed, because it's a business requirement, and hence we need to respond with speed, and it has to be specific. So far, a lot of our efforts here are focused on mass customization. We look at a large group of people, maybe from the same function, belonging to doing similar roles, and then we've done mass customization. But if we can make it specific, it's all the more helpful. So I also keep, reading about the predictive analytics potential that Gen AI has. Okay, like predictive maintenance, it can beforehand tell you, okay, these are the kind of skills which are needed. These are the kind of individuals who could be at risk. If we can leverage that, then we can, fasten the whole process. We need not wait till the last minute. There'll be adequate time for us to prepare. And if you look at a reskilling program, it needs to happen in a much more efficient, fast basis. At times, it may also cover scale. But the rest of the process, be it, you need to have extremely sharp content for addressing the needs. Wherein, with the power that the technology holds to curate content on a fast basis, that's going to be something which is going to be really good. And also when it comes to assessments, because reskilling is about, if there are no certifications for reskilling, that's not really going to help. So when it comes to, as I mentioned earlier, it is not just knowledge assessments, it's also skill assessments that are possible. So that's going to be another huge support that's going to come. And also, even when you get into ChatGPT, any prompt that you put in off, always comes with a very nice summary. So when it comes to reskilling, with with respect to making it adaptive, yes, five of us are learning the same set of things, but we are at different levels. I may need a slightly more deeper immersion into one topic, whereas you might need it on another topic. So doing that, summarizing it, assessing it at different points, all of these are going to be extremely helpful, which will ensure we're able to cover scale with speed, with a lot of focus. So we have been doing it. If we have to talk about Reliance's example, I remember even about close to 2 decades ago, we had run a mass reskilling program wherein we had to train a whole set of people, prepare them for another role. I was just visualizing saying if it was the era of artificial intelligence, then we could have done it with so much more ease. The amount of efforts that we had to, because speed is always a mandatory thing for us here. But the amount of stretch that we had to take to make it happen within those stipulated timelines, if only technology was there, it would have happened a lot more easier and a lot better.
That's true. Such great examples from you as always, Hema. Thank you, Akanksha.
Yeah, I think I'll just add to what's already been said by Mukhvinder and Hema on this, and absolutely agree that, beyond customization or personalization, it's really about speed, right? Because AI and AI reskilling or upskilling, I would say that's led by CLOs. I would say is possibly the key driver for organizational agility, and that's really what makes the difference between how you win in the industry, right? How fast can you move as compared to your competitors? And I think uh, when it comes to learning and development programs, we often speak with a lot of our customers across the globe, and one thing that's very underrated, I would say, is, while we talk about personalization, how structured a learning path, how structured can a learning path be? And we spoke about assessments, right, and individual needs when it comes to, what kind of proficiency levels, and those are absolutely needed, because, I might be at a certain level, I might be at a beginner level, Hema might be at an intermediate or an advanced level, and might need very, very different content or training for the same role that we might be in, right? So I think that becomes extremely important. What we're also and so I think what we've done at Coursera has been that we've kind of inbuilt some of these assessments into all of the courses. So at a skill level, you're able to kind of identify, where is Aastha in her learning journey for a particular skill, right? And where does she really need to go? And we've got a product, what we call skill sets, which are really job role based learning pathways, right? And if we're saying, you need to be from going from a data analyst role to a data scientist role, where are you today in your journey, right? And can you take an assessment of what skills are required for a data scientist, see what your baseline is, and then kind of go there with respect to what those interventions need to be. But I think specifically, and since the topic of our conversation today is, generative AI, we're building out. I wanted to kind of share this exciting news because it's not out there yet. We haven't really brought it to any of our customers yet, but we're still toying with the idea of building out a generative AI academy, right? And in terms of um, speed, I think that's what makes it really, really critical, where we're looking at not just generative AI for individuals at a literacy level, but also what kind of an impact does it have for specific roles, for marketing, for legal, for software engineers, right? Generative AI for teams, for everyone, as well as for leaders, right? How do you really uh, uh, bring about this transformation at an organization level using this? So I think it's going to be very exciting seeing how and where this goes. I know that Hema spoke a little bit about when talking about predictive analytics. We use a tool at Coursera internally that allows us to figure out which customers engaging well with us, not engaging well with us. So if you're not responding to our emails or picking up our calls, you'll start to hear a lot more from us, right? So it gives us a prediction of what kind of sentiment the customer might have with respect to how you're engaging them as well. So super interesting in terms of what all it can do. But I think um, key message that I would possibly want to give on this is that it plays a huge role when it comes to organizational agility. And I think just having something more out of the box that's personalized and can be at scale gives you that speed and gives you that personalization, which I think becomes super critical for organizations to succeed in something that's in business scenarios that are changing almost every month.
Thank you, Akanksha. A generative AI academy. That sounds fantastic. I'll I'll just say I will start with you for our closing questions because we're getting tons of questions from our audience, and I'd love for our panel to answer those as well. For my closing question, before we get on to the audience questions, Akanksha, I'd like to ask you: the rapid global adoption of generative AI is creating a pressing need for organizational agility. What role can business leaders play to embrace this change and leverage AI?
Yeah, I think it's a great question, and I won't take very long on this. But I think I mentioned it at the beginning of our session. CFOs and CEOs are now talking to their CLOs about how can we use AI to get a lot more productivity from organizations. And so I think CLOs really play a very vital role in empowering organizations with a reskilling strategy that kind of supports that business agility. It minimizes that human cost of disruption, and at the same time kind of unlocks not just new skills but also new talent in terms of the talent pipelines we want to create. And I would say the second, and I'll say two more points. One is they will be responsible for transitioning workers from the jobs that are impacted to the jobs that are being created, right? So I think that's another critical role, not just from an upskilling perspective but also from a reskilling perspective. That's going to be important. And then online learning will really be that core strategy for reskilling people at speed and at scale that's required for that business agility. So those are my three quick thoughts on what we've discussed so far.
Thank you, Akanksha. Mukhwinder, would you want to go next?
Yeah, I think the change has to be driven both ways, and actually it is getting driven both ways. It is getting driven from top, and it is getting driven from bottom also. I think the days of just saying that only if leaders push that learning will happen and therefore employees will do, I think those days are gone. I think the new generation and the new set of employees that are coming into our being part of our workforces are extremely keen to kind of learn, are extremely keen to figure out what they want to do, do, and therefore they're kind of charting their own way. They're figuring out what is important to us. But at the same time, that does not mean that some of us who are leaders have any less responsibility. I remember again a few years ago, I think it was beginning of COVID or so, our CEO started to put out, saying, "This is what I'm learning now." Yeah, or this is what I'm excited about, and I don't know much about, but I'm starting to watch YouTube videos, and I started to watch some programs, and I started to do this, and I've engaged with somebody who's helping me learn something new. And that gave a lot of positive flip to the fact that, look, in case if my CEO is turning around and saying, I don't know about this and I'm learning this, that means that's part of the new trend and something that's going to happen on that particular area. And therefore there was a lot of excitement on some of those topics around that. I remember one of our key focus areas, and again a few years ago when we moved away from one of our business verticals was called digital, and we said, while it needed a focus on digital, but we don't need a specific focus on digital, because all businesses are going to be digital. All businesses today are digital, and if that is the case, it doesn't matter whether you're part of technology business or whether you work directly on technology or not, but you need to have a certain amount of technology quotient. Every individual needs to have a certain amount of technology quotient. And then we started to launch programs around cloud, around blockchain, around security, around AI, around all of these, and there were almost 10-12 such courses. And then we just got our leaders to come back and say, hey, I completed my course on blockchain, I loved it, and it became such a buzz. We had a significantly large, on almost about 700,000 people started to do courses around that. And we had, and there were about 10 courses. You can imagine the numbers that we are talking about. And there was no pushing. There was no forcing people to do it. It was said, here what it is, do what makes sense to you. If you already know that, you have an option, which I was mentioning earlier. You already have an option to do a pre-assessment. If you think you're done well, you don't need to go through it because you already know. If you don't know it, then go through it. And these are not long. These are 1 hour courses, just overview. Somebody from HR, somebody from learning. I don't need to know blockchain to that detail, but I need to understand what it means. I need to understand what does security really mean? What are we talking about? And that helped do that. I think so. Therefore, just coming back, I think it's important at both sides for us to, one, encourage our people who are coming new into our workforces, for them to go back and figure out what interests them, what is their aspirations, and therefore what they want to learn, and our leaders to go back and talk about it. I think our challenge is going to be somewhere in middle set of people who are still trying to figure out, and how do we encourage them much more. But as you democratize the whole piece, learning, and say, learn what you need, we got away from saying these are the minimum learning hours you need to have. We got away from that a few years ago, saying, if you need to learn only for 2 hours in a year, then that's what it is. If you need to learn 200 hours in a year, then that's what it is. So we won't force you, we won't track you, we won't pull you up or push you down based on the hours. I think some of those things will be important for us to bring to our employees and make them understand that this is what we're doing and this is what we're trying.
Very, very, very interesting points there, Mukhwinder. Thank you so much. Hema, what do you have to say?
Yeah. So I would start by saying, leaders should start being digital champions, which they already are. In fact, an interesting example that I would like to quote is a couple of months back, one of my seniors here, senior both by age as well as by position, I saw this person using ChatGPT very comfortably. That was this person's go-to for many things. Initial days, so that pushed me, that put pressure on me, saying, now I will have to start using ChatGPT. Got one of my team members to come and, onboard me onto that. So many of them, even if you look at, leaders who belong to Gen X, it's no more an option. They're quite curious about it, adopting it very, very fast. And in Reliance, we have been running for the last couple of years a reverse mentoring program wherein we pair up, people from, let's say, Gen X with Gen Y or Gen Z. Interestingly, if you look at an organization, almost 65% of the population is Gen Y and Gen Z, another 30% is Gen X. So that's a very interesting combination. We pair them up so that they get the best, both ways. So to me, it is not just about knowing digital or doing digital. Yes, you need to know, you need to adopt, you need to understand technology. In fact, we have, like I'm going back to what Mukhinder was saying, we have a emerging technologies curriculum which is thrown open to all people. We keep updating it on a very regular basis so that anyone wants to know about, let's say, artificial intelligence, AR, VR, blockchain, quantum computing. It's not just curated courses that are lying there. We also have regular master classes by experts who do it. But interesting fact that I want to talk about is while this was launched about 2 years back for the entire organization, almost 6 years back, we have done a similar thing mainly for the senior leaders, saying their digital savviness will have to go up, so curating courses from different platforms. They were given the opportunity to up their knowledge about these various technologies. So to me, as I mentioned, it is not just about knowing digital or doing digital. It's actually about being digital. Do you have a digital mindset? Without that, you will not be able to drive any of these changes. And to me, it takes me to some of very basic foundational soft skills, because digital mindset is all about, am I willing to be transparent? I'm not holding things anymore, but I'm willing to make myself transparent, make my function transparent. So transparency becomes very, very important. Personal agility, am I quick enough? Is my thinking fast? Is my learning agility in multiple perspectives? It's learning agility, it's thinking agility, it's action agility. Am I being agile? Am I being, adaptable? Because I'm not holding one of my perspectives very, very strongly, being stubborn. Am I willing to listen to others, change my perspectives, change my points of view, my ability to deal with ambiguity? All of these qualities is what make you strong with respect to digital. Because without this, you can't forget thriving. You can't survive in a digital world. So if you're being digital, it's about not just digital savviness, it's about all of this. And an interesting thing is that I see a lot of leaders, moving in this direction already. So they are being digital champions, they are driving it, and we don't have a choice actually.
Having a digital mindset is what will take us all forward, I'm sure. Thank you so much, Hema, for your insights as well. I will now move on to the audience questions. We've got a bunch. Um, One very interesting question that's come up is, what are the AI skills we as L&D professionals need to develop? And also, what are the potential risks of using AI to design learning intervention solutions? Mukhwinder, would you want to pick this up?
Oh, sure. And I think I very briefly spoke about that earlier, but I think just the ability, as I said, the prompt engineering was one of them. The other area, and I don't think we spoke enough about that, is the whole ethical part of AI, and how do we make that happen. I think for some of us, again, as learning professionals, and whom the technology teams that will work with to bring some learning content slash bring in learning pathways, and all of those things that need to be done. How do we ensure that we are taking care of the ethical side of it? I hope there are no biases that are creeping up, and as you're building content, and there are enough and more examples that at times come up where it is. I remember sometime back in one of the teams that I was talking to, they were presenting a business case of how we can use Gen AI to kind of ease out work, and interestingly, within our firm, it went to a group of people. They looked at the business case, and they came back and said, I think there is a possibility of it getting misused. May not be intentionally, but unintentionally also. Can you go back and relook at it and see how do you really want to use that data points? How do you really want to use some of the information that is getting culled out from there? I think therefore, for us as learning professionals, while we ourselves understand the whole prompt engineering part of it and saying how will that work and what's important for us, uh, understanding what could be the possible pitfalls of it is going to be equally important, because eventually it's going to be some of our technology teams that would be working. They will find the best and the faster methods to do this. I think, how do we ensure that that gets taken care of? I think while speed may not be as big a challenge, I think the other side is going to be much more. And I know if some of you saw the newspaper, I think it was today only, where somebody said that AI will help reduce, or AI, or Gen AI will be able to do about some 50 to 60% of coding of your own, and therefore you may not need people to do. And if that is what we eventually lead to, and therefore our content, and because we are learning people, so therefore if our content is going to look like that, and which is going to be system generated in some way or the other, what happens to it if the system picks up content which actually Hema may have done it for her organization, and system picks it up from some central repository, creates it. What happens to copyrights? What happens? I think those are some things that are going to be important for us as learning professionals to be sure of. How do we build and what do we use it for? More than just the speed. And I'm going to just repeat, the whole bias and the ethical part is going to be important, and therefore us as learning professionals, we need to ensure that we are kind of ahead of that.
Very important aspect of the AI conversation is the ethical aspect of it. Thank you, Mukhwinder. Another question, very interesting, that's come up is how can we leverage the power of generative AI for assessing individual skills and capabilities? Skill assessment is very much required in terms of calculating ROI, one of our audience members has said. Hema, would you want to pick this one up?
Definitely, Aastha. I think I touched upon it a while back. Knowledge assessments, we are too familiar, but skill assessments, wherein, I did talk about it some time back, wherein you have a bot which is acting as an assessor, which is able to do even, for instance, especially things like speech skills, and Coursera has some of those courses already, and we're going to leverage it very, very soon. There's a speech trainer which is not just a trainer but also an assessor, wherein it trains you on certain speaking skills, and then when you do it yourself, it's able to assess. So simple skills like that, we are going to have. We don't need an assessor sitting right in front of the person, but the tool can do it. So be it simulations, be it skill assessments, I think that's going to be possible with artificial intelligence. And also, like I mentioned some time back, the concerns around can we let the individual do it by himself or herself? Should it be proctored is also removed in a big way, because there are multiple aspects like facial recognition, biometric authentication, and also recognizing if there are any other disturbance in the environment, which the technology can take care, which ensures that assessments happen the way you want without disturbance, and it is getting you the kind of results that are needed.
Maybe if I
Thank
can add to that question, right? There's and maybe not just from an assessment standpoint, but we're working with a large telecom company in the region, and what we're thinking about, and still early days for this, but there is so much data that not just lies within Coursera, but when a learner is starting to learn on a platform like that, there is so much information that you learn about this learner, what their career aspirations are, where is it that they're looking to go within an organization. What we're not capturing today, but hope to do in the future, is capture some of the company context, right? How is Reliance or how is an Accenture evolving in their own industries? What kind of roles are they looking to fill going forward in the future? Can we really create not just personalized learning pathways for what you're doing today, but also help you kind of build talent pipelines for tomorrow? Right, and I think that becomes so critical to be able to bridge that gap. Coming back to that business agility side of things, if you're able to bridge that gap using some of the skill assessments, using some of the intelligence that you can bring in with generative AI around company context, around learner context, as well as all the data that you already have today around what your current skill proficiencies might be, I think it's really quite a game changer in terms of what it could do with respect to business success.
Thank you so much, Akanksha. Another question which I feel is posed to the entire panel that's come from the audience is, what are some on-ground examples of how Coursera, Reliance, and Accenture are leveraging AI, machine learning, and how is the data-driven impact being measured? Who would want to start with this one?
See, if I can respond to it, there's a lot of, use cases that we have across different parts of the business. I will not get into it. I'll only talk about the learning side of it. We're in the process of, launching a brand new learning platform, which is going to leverage a lot of this. One is about a very powerful recommendation engine, which is going to be personalized, which will make it very, very customized for that individual. So that's one that we're looking at. And I also mentioned this a while back. In our assessment engine, we have, facial recognition kind of features which have been embedded, which will ensure that there's no foreplay happening there. The individual is actually doing the assessment. So that's another piece that we are looking at. And in when it comes to competency management, that's another piece wherein it's early days for us, but in competencies, it's a laborious process which involves assessing the individual and then assigning required learning based on that. That's also a space wherein we are looking at automating some of the task assessments. Otherwise, it's generally based upon the perception of the manager, uh, based on which assessments happen, which is where we are at this point of time. We'll continue with it for some time. But our aspiration is to take it to a level wherein the machine is able to assess the individual's capability through some very designated task tests, and then decide on what is the proficiency level and further course of action based on that.
Thank you. My competency management is very interesting when you look at it from the lens of AI and machine learning. Uh, Akanksha Mukhwinder, would you want to chime in regarding examples, on-ground examples from Coursera or Accenture leveraging AI machine learning and the measurement of the on-ground impact?
Mukinder, would you want to go first?
Okay, I'll go first. So I don't think we have far too many use cases. I mean, I think we're experimenting with a few things. I think one of the areas, I think we've spoken about this earlier, is the learning paths that may be required at different levels. I think there is some tests that are happening around that area. We are also doing some tests around, is there a content that can be done? I don't think we have enough conclusive of saying that that's clean enough, ethical enough, and unbiased enough, and all that. I think there is work that's happening internally within our on some of the projects and some of the areas that we are focusing on. So that's where we are at this point of time.
Yeah, I think I touched upon some of the topics on how Coursera is using generative AI earlier, and I'll maybe quickly recap that. And I think an interesting question for the panelists would also be, how are you individually using generative AI, right? And it's an interesting question on how all of us kind of using that. But just to recap, how Coursera is doing this is, I spoke about breaking language barriers with respect to kind of doing machine translations when it comes to languages. That's one area where we're really deeply investing in kind of making high quality content a lot more accessible. We spoke a little bit about, Mukwinder was talking about reducing the content chaos. How do we personalize what's really relevant for learners? So we're using Coursera Coach as a mentor, as a guide to kind of help do that, and really make it very interactive. And then we spoke about speed as well, and so using some of our AI assisted course builders, what we're calling Coursera's course builder. I think that's another way that we're doing it, of course. And more information to come on the generative AI academy that we're working on. But those are some of the ways that we're using it. But I'd love to know, how are you using ChatGPT in your day to day work? I mean, I have a ton of examples of how I'm using it. I don't know if I want to talk about it publicly, but still, I'd love to know, Hema, Mukwinder, Aastha, if you have examples of how you're using it.
Yeah, Akanksha, if I can go first, to add on, I missed out on one point. We're also introducing, very soon introducing generative AI. I spoke about the emerging technology curriculum, wherein it's a traditional one. We have a lot of material around different topics, but we're using a chatbot in that space, which will, depending upon the prompt, it's a very quick way of gathering information about be it any digital data topic. So that's something which is going to come up in the next 2 to 3 weeks for us. Eagerly looking forward to it. So that's one powerful space. To respond to your question, Akanksha, I prepared for this very panel discussion using ChatGPT. Okay, so I went to it and I was not very happy with the initial set of responses I got. One of my team members said, "Your prompts were not good. Go back and relook at your prompts." I did that and I got slightly better responses. So it's turning out to be my go-to place for many things.
Yeah, I'm not using it as much. Yeah, but as I told you, as my son was preparing for his and my daughter was preparing for for something, and then we went there and I helped her kind of sharpen the sharpen the prompts a little bit for sure. I said, maybe something like this, maybe something like this may make more sense. But I haven't. We're in the process of saying, is there an opportunity for us to build an internal repository, something that we can rely upon much more, especially within a firm. And I think there is work happening that one. Just as a firm, we're being extremely cautious of what we're picking up from where, and the whole bias bit of it. So therefore, not jumping into as much at this point of time. But interestingly, as I said, I'm helping my kids use it for something that they are building, or something that they are working on, projects that they're working on.
Nice. You're taking that shortcut, Mukwinder. That's lovely. Using prompt engineering to help your kids with their homework, and
Yeah.
that's
Anything
amazing.
that helps. Anything that helps.
Yeah, and Hema, I think I need to take some tips from you on how you're using ChatGPT for this. I'll maybe quickly add to this. Every time there's a quarter end, you always have step backs with your team to provide feedback, and a lot of times you have all of these thoughts in your head. So I've kind of dumped them on ChatGPT and gave it a prompt of saying, how do you make this feedback more actionable, more friendly for me to deliver it, and then kind of use that
Very
in
interesting.
some of my conversations. I hope none of my team members are here on this on this webinar, but it really helps kind of bring all my thoughts together. So I do use it as a thought partner in that sense.
Really interesting answers to this last question, I must say. Taking your own thoughts and taking them to the next level is an interesting way of using ChatGPT, I must say. And great job, Hema, for preparing for this with ChatGPT. Very interesting, and Mukhwinder's response, helping the kids out as well. We've had such a great discussion. Thank you so much. We're already overshooting our time. I would like to, with this, wrap up today's session. Thank you once again, Hema, Mukhwinder, and Nakangsha, for taking out the time from your busy schedules for this riveting discussion. I absolutely enjoyed it thoroughly. We would also like to extend our gratitude to our partner Coursera for helping us curate the discussion. And a big thank you to our audience for giving us such thought provoking questions. We could have gone on for like at least an hour if you were to take up all the questions. Thank you for making this so interactive. It's been a pleasure hosting all of you. We hope most of your questions were answered. Please stay in touch with People Matters for details on our upcoming virtual learning sessions. Have a great day ahead, everyone. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having us,
Thank
Aastha,
you
and
so
thanks,
much.
Hema and
Bye-bye.
Mukwinder.
Thank you.